The following program is a production of Hō'ike Kaua'i Community Media. Island Alert was made possible in part by the Kauai Island Utility Cooperative.
Aloha, and welcome to the show where we get to know Kauai's first responders. I'm Max Richardson.
And I'm Chief Todd Raybuck.
And today we're going to be talking all about the Kauai Police Department. All right, so let's just jump right into it. Now, this being the inaugural episode, actually, this is the first ever episode of this show. Let's do some get-to-know-you questions. So, for starters, how long have you been Chief of Police?
Well, I was sworn in as the Chief of Police in April of 2019. So just about 5.5 years now as the Chief.
Okay, cool. All right. And did you start on Kauai as Chief, or did you, I know you came over from Nevada, but did you come over as a more rank and file officer and work your way up, or were you appointed as Chief?
I was appointed as Chief, so I started my law enforcement career actually as an Air Force cop stationed on Oahu at a place called Wheeler Air Force Base that now is Wheeler Army Base.
Okay.
But that's where I started my law enforcement career and had the fortunate opportunity to get introduced to the amazing Hawaiian Islands and the beautiful culture here and the beautiful people. And so from there, I finished my tenure with the Air Force and ended up in Las Vegas and spent 27 years rising through the ranks, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and retired as a captain, a bureau commander.
Awesome. Okay. So this is your retirement gig?
This is a retirement gig, yes.
All right.
But it has not been like retirement. It's been a lot. It's not been a cushy retirement gig.
Well, you're still working. That's where you messed up, is you?
Yeah, I failed at retirement the first time. Let's just say that.
Yeah, and that happens to the work-motivated folks, I know.
Not in a bad way. I don't want to suggest that this hasn't been an amazing experience, but
no, I'm just sure it's hard work being any police officer, but the Chief of Police, I'm sure it's not the easiest job.
It has its moments.
So, all right, so you were a cop in Las Vegas. How similar or dissimilar is that from Reno 911?
That's a really good question. It's very different, actually.
Okay.
True story, though, when I was a young cop, I worked in a small area south of Las Vegas called Laughlin. It was right on the Colorado River across from Bullhead, Arizona. And my lieutenant thought it'd be a great idea to put us in shorts. And so we wore shorts and shirts instead of a full uniform because it's very hot down there, 120 degrees.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that the creators of Reno 911 saw us wearing those shorts. And that was where the idea of Reno 911 was born.
So you're a fashion icon.
Let's just say they were the most uncomfortable shorts I've ever worn in the line of duty.
I can imagine. I can only imagine. All right. So take me through the journey, I guess. So you mentioned you were in the Air Force. Did you, like when you were a little kid, did you always want to be a cop when you grew up? Was it something you just kind of fell into? Tell me about the journey from being a regular kid to now the Chief of Police.
Yeah, I did pretty much always want to be a police officer. I grew up, one of my greatest mentors growing up was my godfather. He was the Chief of Police in the community that I lived in. And so I had the opportunity to grow up and kind of be in his shadow and get to see how he connected with our community, and really loved and admired him. And so as a kid growing up, there were two experiences that really led me into law enforcement. That was the first one, obviously. But the second one was, it was something simple. We used to have and we still do. Wilcox just held one recently. It's called a bike rodeo. And it's where you bring the kids together and you teach them how to ride their bicycle safely and navigate our streets and sidewalks. And so when I was in elementary school, I had gone to a bike rodeo and two police officers. Today we call them SROs, but back in those days we called them officer friendly. And those police officers made me feel important. They paid attention to me. They got to know me, and they showed me that they cared about me. And that made a lasting impact on me and really opened up the door for me to see police officers in a positive light, and led me to want to go into the career field where hopefully, it's not always a touchy-feely situation when you get to meet people in this profession, but there are plenty of times where you can make a difference in people's lives, and that's why I was drawn to the profession.
That's awesome. And I think that's kind of the best reason to want to be a police officer, is to make positive difference in people's lives. And
Yep.
yeah, that's cool. And so, okay, so you joined the Air Force. Did they call it military police in the Air Force, or does it have a different?
At that time, it was called security police.
Okay.
But military police. And I did that for 4.5 years. And it was an incredible experience to be able to. My youngest son just joined the Air Force last month. He graduated from basic training.
Oh,
it was the first time. Thank you. It's the first time in 30 years that I had been back on that parade field. And it was a rush of emotions. Actually, more than 30 years. I'm a little bit older than that. But it was amazing to be able to see that and experience that again as a parent.
I bet it was. I can only imagine. So he went to the same boot camp for you. Does the Air Force only have one training center, or do they have multiple boot camps?
They do. They only have one. It's in Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio.
So how cool. So your son marched on that same parade field that you did.
The same exact parade field I did. So it was a very emotional moment for me to be able to experience that.
That's cool. That's really cool. Well, congratulations to Airman Raybuck.
Thank you.
And were you at Wheeler your whole Air Force career? Or?
No, I started at Wheeler and did 3 years there, and then I transferred to Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Okay.
And that's where I actually got introduced to an opportunity to apply for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. Perfect. And so I applied and was fortunate enough to get hired at the tender age of 22.
All right, so I guess we can move right on to the meat and potatoes questions. What would you say are the biggest challenges facing the Kaua'i Police Department when it comes to maintaining public safety on our island?
I think the biggest challenge for the Kaua'i Police Department is really the challenge that law enforcement faces all over the country right now, and that is being able to recruit and retain police officers. This job has always been a very difficult job. And the men and women that do this job, not just in uniform, but all the professional support services, our dispatchers, our clerks, all of the back of the house folks, they really commit a lot and sacrifice a lot to serve our community. And so it's become increasingly more difficult to be able to perform these professions and to find people that want to go into this profession today. We all know that, law enforcement has taken its hit over the years for mistakes made by a few that have impacted the many. And so I think one of the most difficult challenges for us is to, push past the national narratives about policing and law enforcement. Fortunately, I don't think on our island we have a lot of the issues that law enforcement faces in other communities across the country. Our police officers and our employees come from this community. They're part of this community, and they live in this community. So they don't commute from another community to work here. They all live here, and they're part of it, and they have deep-rooted connections. I think for as far as maintaining public safety, it's the same as everywhere. Economic challenges, substance abuse issues, things that impact every community impacts us here as well.
Okay. So, all right. So retention was a thing you mentioned, and I hear that being mentioned across the board. I used to, up until very recently, I covered all the county council meetings, so I would hear that's actually where you and I met, was at a county council meeting. But all the different chiefs, all the different department heads, pretty much everybody is talking about that. That's a big problem, retention, trying to get people to want to have government jobs, and especially like uniform jobs, firefighters, police officers. And I guess if anybody knew the answer, then we wouldn't have that problem. But just in your opinion, what do you think is the answer? How do we entice people to want to be police officers?
Yeah, I think that it's a very difficult thing to put it's not just one factor. There's many different factors, and different people have different reasons. I started to see a transition about 15 or so years ago in law enforcement where, when I joined policing in Las Vegas over little over 32 years ago. And when I joined the police department, the prevailing, perception was, I'm going to join the police department and I'm going to stay for 30 years. Our workforce in every industry today don't have that same philosophy. I think most industries today see a lot shorter commitment to one specific career field or one specific employer. And so I don't think law enforcement's any different than the majority of industries today. It makes it much more difficult for us in law enforcement, though, because the pressures of the job, it's a stressful job. I didn't get these gray hairs because, this job was easy. But it's a stressful job. It's a difficult job. It requires a lot of work, and it comes with a lot of scrutiny. Virtually every decision that you make becomes fodder for somebody who didn't like it. And there's a lot of pressure in the media today. There are cameras everywhere. And so the level of scrutiny on our police officers today is higher than it's ever been in my career. And I think that, unfortunately, a lot of the narrative that may be warranted for a specific situation occurring with a specific individual or individuals has kind of cast a cloud over a next generation of would-be police officers. But that being said, every day, young men and women, and not so young men and women looking for a second career, still join this profession because it goes back to what I talked about earlier. This is a noble profession, and it's not a perfect profession. We make mistakes. We try to learn from those mistakes and move forward so that we can be better at what we do tomorrow than we were today. And every day, men and women still raise their right hand and take the oath and pin on the badge, and they walk out of their door and kiss their wife and kids goodbye, or their husband and kids goodbye, their significant other, and know that that shift is going to include a lot of unknowns and some dangers that they can't perceive and are unaware of. And they do it because they care about the community they live in and they want to make a difference. And so, I think economics plays into it. Everybody on Kaua'i knows that this is a very, very difficult place financially to own a home and also, especially on a government salary, and to raise a family. The economy with the increase of groceries and the cost of living today makes it much more difficult. And so I think there's, the long answer, as I kind of have made it, is it's a complicated issue. And it's not like throwing darts and hitting one bullseye and solving the problem. It's a spectrum of challenges that we have to continuously try to navigate and minimize along the way.
All right, that's a good answer. Well said. Kaua'i is a small, close-knit community. How do you balance enforcing the law with maintaining that sense of aloha and community spirit that we love about our island?
I have to admit that I have a significant amount of respect for the men and women that do this job in this community. I did law enforcement for 27 years, and very rarely did I have a call or encounter someone who was a relative or a neighbor or a classmate where I had to take enforcement action or make the difficult decision to maybe arrest someone. And early in my tenure as a police chief, I was on a ride-along, and I came up, and it was a domestic dispute between a father and a son, and the son was being arrested, and there were a lot of emotions involved. And, it was heartbreaking because even after being in this profession for 3 decades, the human side of things never goes away. As a parent myself, it's tough to see when, unfortunately, some bad decisions have a cause and effect. And so as the son was saying goodbye to his dad and getting transported to the police car by the officer, I looked at the officer I was with. I said, "Man, that's a really tough decision." And he said, or situation. And he said, "Yeah, the arresting officer, that's her cousin."
Man.
And that was really the initiation for me understanding how much more difficult it is for our police officers to do their job here, because I know that some people, after doing their job, haven't been invited to the Christmas party anymore. And it's difficult. But I believe that our police officers do a great job at trying to manage, the situations that they're in and making the right decisions. Again, we're not a perfect profession, and it's still human beings, still, emotions get involved. But I think that overall, our police officers do a really, really great job at tempering the situations, especially when it's with people that they know, and they do their job professionally.
Well, that's good to hear. And yeah, that's admirable. So there's a big houselessness problem on Kauai, and I imagine it can be a pretty thorny issue for police to deal with. How do you walk that line between maybe punishing someone for a situation that might be beyond their control, poverty, substance addiction, et cetera, versus keeping good order and discipline in our public places?
Yeah, houselessness is a challenge nationwide. I mean, I travel here and there throughout the year for personal reasons and for the job. And I go into different communities, and it's an issue that affects everybody today, even in some places where you didn't have the same issue 10, 15 years ago. I think that, for us with our houselessness issue, it's even more difficult because there are so many families that are literally one paycheck away from potentially being houseless for a variety of reasons, the lack of affordable housing, the cost of living that we talked about a little bit earlier. And so, during the pandemic, I would frequently go out and assist with providing supplies to our houseless communities and getting to meet people. And you see, a young husband and wife, in a houseless camp, and they have, children's toys, and they have their toddlers there with them, and their pack and play, all the things that, are familiar to me as a parent, but instead of it being in a living room, it's in a park somewhere, or it's in someone's, in a field somewhere. And it's devastating. Houselessness isn't a crime, and the police department doesn't want it to be a crime. And so we try really, really hard to temper our response towards criminal activity. Just because someone is houseless doesn't allow them to engage in criminal activity. And unfortunately, we see, especially in some of these repetitive issues, we see a lot of drug dealing, drug use, theft, and other, types of criminal offenses. And so we have to really manage and mitigate each circumstance, depending on the circumstances. One of the things that is really challenging for our police officers is, it's uncomfortable to see houseless people, right? If you walk outside your door in the morning to pick up the newspaper, and there's a tent and there's houseless people just across the street from you, that's uncomfortable. And I understand that. Uncomfortable doesn't necessarily equal crime. And so, we only can enforce crimes. And I think it's important, it's difficult when our police officers are called in and they tell people that they have to move because of a trespass issue, because of criminal activity, because, public health. Some of these, unfortunately, these encampments grow so large that it really becomes a danger to public health because of the unsanitary conditions. And so we have to come in and take action to try to mitigate that for the entire community. And it puts our police officers in a very difficult position because they now are being asked, where am I supposed to go? And we don't have an answer for them. And so it's a very difficult job where our police officers are torn in between, meeting community expectations while enforcing criminal law and trying to be compassionate towards people who are in a really tough situation. And so it's a problem. And that's why as a community, we have to find ways to try to address this issue because it's not a law enforcement issue.
On the subject of houseless folks, what can you tell me about that big homeless encampment that was over near across from the rotunda at the county building? I noticed there were a lot of trees had been cut down, and a lot of the folks have moved out of there.
Yeah, so we had we received complaints on houseless camps quite frequently, obviously. And that was one that we had received numerous complaints about. It was on private property. And so I think one of the frustrations that comes in from the community is that, using that location as an example, they call the police department and say, this houseless camp is growing, it's this, it's that. And there's no criminal nexus and it's on private property. And so the police department doesn't have legal authority to do anything about that location. It really becomes the responsibility of the property owner themselves to go in, to trespass people, to clean it up and to resolve, the situation there. And so that the property owners there had taken action on their own. And as you can see the result, a marked difference now between where it was and where it is today.
Moving on, maybe a little more happier topic. Are there any community outreach programs or initiatives that the department is focusing on that address specific issues on the island? I think we all know about KPAL, but are there any more specifically tailored programs?
Yeah, I don't want to brush over KPAL though, because that's just an incredible program. I mean, anytime a police department our size, so we're a mid-sized police department by national standards. We're the smallest agency in the state, but we're a mid-sized police department by national standards with 160 authorized positions, but actually we're operating at about 131 to 133. When you take a look at our KPAL program, I can tell you that, when 700 to 800 youth come out to play football on the weekends, when we have boxing programs and we have baseball programs and we have, art programs. In fact, we've had some programs here at Hō'ike for, you guys have helped sponsor some youth programs to help kids get involved into production and TV and stuff like that. And so, those types of programs, if we want to make changes in our community, you have to invest in our children. And so our KPAL program, I think, is one of the highlights and the success stories of our department, because what they are able to do, there's only 3 to 4 officers that are assigned to that full time. And what they're able to coordinate year round with, building these programs, and now with the support of the county council and the mayor's office with the budget, that is really that's investing in our future. And so, KPAL is one of the highest known community resources that we have, but I think it's important for us to continue focusing on that, so we continue to develop and nurture our children into being responsible adults and hopefully recruiting them to work in our police department in the future. But there are a lot of other ways that we engage the community or other types of outreach and initiatives. Obviously, one of the things that I brought to Kauai, which I love in the summertime, is our Touch a Truck program, and it's grown every year. Our community resource folks have done an amazing job at continuing to bring in more and more community partners. And if nobody's been to that before, it's usually in July. And, it's just incredible. It's great from kids to kupuna. And we have police cars and dump trucks and, boom trucks and bulldozers. And, when I was as a father, one of the books I think every parent reads to their kids when they're little is the book of trucks, right? The truck book. And you read that. And it was one of my son's favorite books. And they loved saying, that's an excavator, that's a police truck, that's a fire truck. And so our Touch a Truck program brings those books to life. And it allows our community partners, our county partners, we get to see people in sanitation. We hear about it at county council for budget, for public works, our community partners that build our roads and do this and do that. But they never get to talk to them. And so I'm really proud of the work that our folks have done to build up, the Touch a Truck program, where we get 700 to 800 people in about a 4 or 5 hour block that come through and get to really see what all of our county workers and community partners do in our community every day to make this a great place to live. But we do other things too, It's not so much community outreach, but it's to make public safety. We have our traffic grants that allow us to do additional enforcement resources to keep our roadways safe so that people can go to and from work or take their kids to school and do it without the fear and worry that something bad will happen to them in a car accident. So we have those types of programs. We have drug interdiction efforts that we use. You know, we have neighborhood watch programs. That's important. Those programs allow members of in their community to be able to be participants in making their community safer. And so, you know, those programs draw together neighbors. It's proven that when neighbors talk to neighbors and share information and be able to report things that don't belong somewhere, neighborhoods are safer. And so our neighborhood watch program is a great way for us to take control in our own neighborhood with our next door neighbors to make it a safer place. And then, you know, of course, we have our partnership with Crime Stoppers. And so if people, you know, are aware of crime or have information about crime, they can report it to us. And you can find out more information about the Crime Stoppers program by going to crimestopperskauai.org. That's crimestopperskauai.org. And there's a phone number, there's an app that you can share information anonymously with us so that we can do follow-up on investigating crimes to hopefully deter and or stop some of the criminal activity that occurs in our community.
I did not know there was an app. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Do you know much about it?
Yeah, so online, there's information on how you can download. It's called a P3 app. And it'll allow you to download either by Android or by Apple product. And that will allow you, instead of using a telephone, you can actually make a report to Crime Stoppers directly through the app. So you don't have to even pick up the phone and call. And this is a way for, you know, if you're in an environment where maybe you don't want to pick up the phone and say, "Hi, dispatch. Yeah, there's a guy sitting next to me in a blue shirt with a beard and a microphone, and I think he's a nefarious character. He's up to no good. I saw him on the news. He's the guy that, you know, you didn't do any crime." But that's kind of uncomfortable for people to do, right? But through the app, you could put in all of that information and report it without the person next to you even knowing that you're reporting it. So crimestopperskauai.org is a great place to find out more about the app.
It sounds like I think, yeah, we've all known that Crime Stoppers is a very useful program, but that sounds like they're just coming out with more and more useful things for the everyday citizen to have. That app sounds cool. I heard that you recently appointed a deputy chief. What can you tell me about that?
Yes, I'm very excited. Assistant Chief Mark Ozaki, a pillar in our community for a long, long time. I talked about KPAL earlier. Mark was one of the founders of the original KPAL program. He was one of the original SROs. And so his thumbprint in our community, both on and off duty, has been remarkable. And it's all over from the west side to the North Shore. And so, you know, accepting the role and responsibility of deputy chief is a pretty big deal. And so Mark actually, you know, he's committed to this community. He's committed to this police department, and he's got almost 25 years on the job. And he wants to continue to make a difference in our police department. And so I was grateful that he accepted my offer to be the deputy chief, and we'll do a promotion ceremony pretty soon. I've been on vacation, he's on vacation, and so excited about that.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. I've known Mark Ozaki since I was about 18. He was in charge of KPAL when my dad and I started the Sea Scout ship, which was originally chartered through KPAL. And then also my dad coached wrestling for KPAL for a while. So yeah, I've known Mark Ozaki since I was a kid, and it was interesting. The first time I was in a county council meeting, and Assistant Chief Ozaki came in, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's Sergeant Ozaki." It's cool to see him. He's a good guy, and he strikes me as a good cop. It's good to see him working his way up.
He's a great cop. He came up through the ranks. He knows the department very well. He knows the community very well. It's been my goal to have a deputy chief from within the organization for a long time. And one of the challenges that we had was a salary inversion. And so several years ago, I was fortunate enough to partner with HR and the salary commission. It was supported by the county council to be able to increase the pay or actually allow the assistant chief to keep his pay at that rate. Otherwise, if he had taken the deputy chief position, he would have gotten a reduction in pay. And that's hard to do, to take on more responsibility and lose pay in the process.
Yeah, that's a hard sell.
Yeah. And so, I'm super excited to have Mark on board.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I'm excited too. So with Kauai being such a popular tourist destination, how does the department manage the unique challenges that might be posed by visitors that might not be familiar with local laws or even local customs that might be informal? Like I know at the Kalihiwai Bridge, you can always tell who's not from here because 5 cars will go by and then 3 more go by and you go, oh, those 3 guys didn't know.
Yeah, fortunately, most of our visitors abide by the law. They're not, the laws are the same. Traffic laws don't change much. You still can't steal things. You still can't act a fool, in public and some of those things. And so we don't have a lot of challenges with our visitors as far as impacting us on the crime sense, as far as impacting our community. I think one of the challenges, obviously, that we talk about quite frequently is what's described as over-tourism. We're a small island with small infrastructure, and so I think that the average daily rate of our tourists is roughly about 25,000, which is a third of our island's population. And so when you add 25,000 more people into the mix on a daily basis, obviously our roadways, it's more difficult for people to travel. We do see some increases in crime where it targets our tourists, particularly when it comes to theft and those types of issues. But, we have, I think one of the greatest challenges with tourism is, we've all been on vacation. I can tell you that before I moved to Kauai, it was difficult to fully appreciate the struggle that local people in the community has towards this influx. Like I said, we have 73,000 residents, and then you tack on 25,000 tourists. That has a dramatic impact on everything. We all go to the same grocery stores because there aren't that many. And, you always know when it's tourist season because the shelves are dry with certain things that you want. And you start to realize that, there is a big impact. So for me, when I go as a visitor in other communities, it's made me a lot more aware and cognizant of being more respectful to, the local population and trying to minimize my footprint. I think that our Kauai Visitors Bureau and the other entities have done a good job at trying to educate our tourists and our visitors how to, malama the aina and try to be a little bit more respectful. But it's a challenge, when you're talking about turning over 25,000 visitors, the people that we tell today, hey, don't park there, aren't the same people that are parking there tomorrow. And so that message has to come out. You're constantly sharing the message. And so for all of us, saying it 400 times feels like, when are they going to get the clue? And so it sometimes creates frustration that is misdirected because that family that is getting screamed at today, because this is the 27th time you've had to tell somebody you're supposed to wait at the bridge for somebody else to cross or this or that, they don't know any better. And so it's, we all have to try to check ourselves sometimes too and realize, some of them just don't know any better. But continuously communicating and educating people, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. Yeah, communication, I think so many problems, not just tourism related, not just law enforcement related, but I think a lot of interpersonal problems will be solved if people just communicated better.
Yeah, it's becoming increasingly more difficult for two-way communication.
Ironically, considering that communication technology and methods of communication have improved, our literal ability to communicate has improved dramatically.
Yeah.
But our willingness to communicate seems to have not improved as much.
Right.
Do you notice an increase in demands on resources, on like police resources, on days when the cruise ship pulls in?
I don't have any actual information that we see an influx. Obviously, it's localized, right? So when the cruise ship comes in and the tourists all come off, and you'll see, the Ubers and the taxis and the rental cars and folks, the touros, they'll all be, concentrated in the Willy Willy. But it fluctuates. So again, we don't see on the police department side any significant increase in crime or public safety matters. It typically is just more matters of inconvenience. And the police department, thankfully, tries to stay out of addressing matters of inconvenience.
Well, good. Yeah, I'm sure some people are not thrilled about that. Like, what do you mean I can't call the cops because somebody irritated me? But it's good to have one's priorities straight, I suppose. And what about drugs? I know there are some problems with illegal drug use and distribution on our island. And how do you handle these kinds of issues? What kind of cooperation do you have with state and federal agencies? What's our drug strategy look like?
Okay. Well, again, we talked earlier about houselessness, and houselessness isn't unique to just Kauai, right? It's a nationwide problem. Unfortunately, substance use disorder is also a nationwide problem. And so our community isn't unique in the fact that we have a substance use disorder issue. What's unique about our community is because we are so interconnected and everybody knows everybody, that it is so much more aware in our community of the challenges that we face when it comes to drugs and illegal drug use. And couple that with the fact that our remote, community, a lack of treatment and prevention resources, complicates the issue even more for us and our families. Substance use disorder it impacts most families. It impacts mine. It impacted mine. One of my close relatives suffered from substance use disorder through adolescence, high school, and his entire adult life. And tragically, last year, he lost that fight. And so, it's a challenge for all of us. And, again, I go back to law enforcement isn't the answer. Arresting people isn't necessarily, the cure. It is a necessity. And I want to make that clear. My family member would have died much, much earlier in his life had he not been incarcerated for a while and had the opportunity to, make better choices. Unfortunately, the battle of addiction is difficult. And so some people relapse and go back to it. So incarceration is necessary at times, but we need to spend more time on prevention. And that's why I'll go back to KPAL, why I believe KPAL is so important. Because, we want to reach our youth at an age where we give them opportunities to learn that choices have consequences. I used to be a substance abuse instructor. I taught a lot of drug classes in my day, drug awareness classes throughout my career. And I used to tell people all the time, you may get an opportunity to choose to use a drug, but you don't get a choice whether or not you'll be addicted. And so, with our youth, maybe I'm just going to smoke a joint and it'll be okay. Maybe it will be. Let's not lie. There are plenty of people who have used marijuana in their life and then gone on to be successful and everything else. But for every one of those, I can see people that, never grew up saying, I want to be an addict one day. I've never met anybody, and in 32 years of policing, I've met, unfortunately, a lot of people with substance use disorder, and not one of them told me when I was a kid growing up I wanted to be an addict and find myself houseless, shooting needles or sniffing fentanyl. Not one of them ever grew up. That was never part of their dream. Unfortunately, that decision to begin to use intoxicating and addicting drugs led them on that course. And so, that's why I think having programs, youth programs, I won't mention any by name just because I don't want to forget somebody or mention somebody over someone else, but that's why some of our community youth programs that educate our kids, get them involved in physical activities are so important. Hopefully someday our adolescent treatment center will meet its full, capacity of providing those services to our community. But we work very, very closely. I hate to bring up a difficult subject in our community, but several years ago we partnered with our federal partners at the ATF and the FBI, the U.S. Marshal Service, to take down a drug ring that included, a member of county council. And so we work in very, very close participation with all of our federal partners, the Homeland Security investigations, as I mentioned, ATF, U.S. Marshal Service, FBI, DEA. They work with us very, very closely to address those individuals that are responsible for bringing in, distributing this poison that gets down to our youth and steals and robs their futures from them. And so we'll continue to work with them. HIDA, which is the high intensity drug trafficking area, we are a member of that. This year I'll be the executive board chair again. And so every year through the Office of National Drug Control Policy, we get federal grant money that comes to our island. Just about $176,000 or so, I think, or $196,000 this year is our allotment. And that provides us the opportunity to do some prevention as well as doing some enforcement and going after some of the people that are responsible for bringing these drugs into our community. So I'm grateful for the participation and support that we get from all of our partners.
All right, awesome. And I'm very sorry for your loss. I know I've had friends and family who have fought that battle too, and I know yeah, like you said, nobody gets there on purpose.
No.
And it's a damn shame.
Thanks.
So you mentioned the remoteness of the island. That's something that's always baffled me is what a big problem or a big piece of the drug problem is ice, right? Is methamphetamine. But this island is tiny. Where's all the ice coming from? There's not like meth labs. You'd find them right away, right? So where's all this meth come from?
Yeah, I'll tell you. So you mentioned ice, meth. In 1987 was when I got stationed on Wheeler, to throw back if you want to start counting the years back. And at that time, I remember that the ice craze was taking over. There were gangs that were responsible for distributing it. And I remember specifically watching the evening news about, newscasts that were saying that this ice was creating these zombies, these violent zombies, and there was a police shooting. I remember vividly from many, many years ago where the individual was high on ice. And so that just kind of shows the depth of the challenge that we've had in our communities here in the islands is that, we're talking about second and third generation people that have grown up watching their parents do it, and then they slipped into it, and now maybe their kids are slipping into it. And so how does it get here? Just like your Amazon packages do, just like our tourists do. I won't tell you what I told Congress, but it's parcels, it's mailed in, and it's brought in by aircraft and container. And so when you just talk about the fact that, we see 1 million visitors a year here on Kauai, a little over 1 million, and we have the smallest tourist base. Think about the influx of visitors that come into that travel through Honolulu International Airport, and every one of them, could have some of these drugs in their bags, and some of them do. And so that's how it gets here.
It sounds like a very difficult medium to police, yeah. When you put it in those terms,
Yeah.
1 million people.
Which one has the pound of meth,
Yeah.
Fortunately, we have, again, I go back to our partnerships with the post office, with the parcel businesses, with our federal partners. We have a lot of tools at our disposal, and we do a pretty good job at identifying patterns and personnel that are, that we can hone in on and hold responsible for bringing these poisons into our community. But it's a challenge, not to open another taboo subject, but if you look at the issue of fireworks, illegal fireworks, it's frustrating to deal with this, a couple of times a year where, our neighborhoods smell like a war zone and they sound like it too. And, where our firefighters are battling, errant fires set off by illegal fireworks, and our EMS personnel are responding to people who are injured and hurt from illegal fireworks. And the community is so frustrated. You have people with PTSD, you have people with, chronic health issues, you have, animals, you have all of these folks that are traumatically impacted by illegal fireworks. And the community calls, and they're frustrated at the police departments, and they're frustrated about what we can do and what we're not doing. And it all comes in the same way. And, that's why, what attracted me to Kauai was I was working in a major city. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department's like the 7th largest police department in the country. And I was very grateful for the opportunity to do my time there, and the programs that we had there, I think were some of the best police programs in the country. But the challenge is that it's a very big city with a lot of moving parts. And I think one of the things that's very unique about our community is that interconnectedness that we've talked about a few times already, and our ability to really make a difference if we all work together to make the difference.
All right. So I think we can all agree one of the greatest assets on Kauai is its natural beauty. I think that's what brings a lot of people here, and that's what inspires a lot of people to stay here. How does the police department work to protect the environment, particularly in areas like illegal dumping, maybe poaching, I know is a problem sometimes, vandalism of sacred sites? And how does the police department work to combat that? And also, do you guys work with other agencies, maybe state, federal agencies?
Yeah, so some of those things are like the protecting the sacred sites and things like that. That a lot of times that if that's on private property, it's the kuleana of the property owners, or if it is state property, a lot of that's on state property. That's the responsibility of DoCare or DLNR. And so, the police department has some limited roles in that. Obviously, if there is vandalism, we investigate that and hopefully hold the people accountable for doing such a thing. We are very blessed. Kauai is one of the most beautiful places in the world. Unfortunately, and I know here's another taboo subject to bring up, is the abandoned vehicles. And it's mind-boggling to me, quite frankly. And it's frustrating. I drove by one on the way to work today, and it's, stripped out, and it's not on the road. It's off the outside of the area of KPD's jurisdiction, but it's there, and it's frustrating. And, the county has recycling programs. It doesn't cost anything to be able to turn in your car, and, to see them on the side of the road. And then we just have to do better. I can tell you that it's not our tourists that are dumping cars on the side of the road. It's not the tourists that are, dropping off tires at our beach parks. They're not the ones doing that. These are folks that live here. And that's why I go back to, as a community, For us to have the community that we want to live in, as a community, we've got to make the community the one that we want to live in. And so, hold each other accountable for that. Make sure you call it in. If you see somebody doing something, call us and tell us. We can't always be everywhere all the time, and we can't always catch the people or get enough, probable cause to effect an arrest, but it allows us to do something. But again, I go back to, protecting our island and making this a great place to live is all of our responsibilities. It's not just the police departments. We just play a small part in that.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. And the mindset is frankly baffling, where it's like with the same mouth, you'll have somebody saying like, oh, we have to love and respect our INA, and also say, well, I don't want this washing machine anymore, but Puhi Metals is too far, so I'm just going to put it on the side of the road. You're like, where do you think that's going to go?
Right. Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. So how do you guys respond to natural disasters, kind of pivoting away from human originated crimes, I guess? What are some key lessons we've learned from things like the floods that just happened earlier this year, things like that?
Well, I think it's very well known that Kauai is very resilient. We just had an anniversary last month for, Hurricane Hō'ike. And, that wasn't so far back that people living and working here today have forgotten what the impact of that hurricane was on our community. And so I think, fortunately, we have a lot of folks that know what it took to get through that and to overcome the challenges of that. Clearly, things have changed a little bit since 1992. And our communities have changed a little bit, but I'm still confident that because of like our floods on the North Shore, some of our floods on the east side, the floods recently on the south and west side, our community pulls together. I'm very, very proud of the partnerships that all of our first responders, our county workers do. What people don't see behind the scenes is the partnership and the collaboration that really goes into each one of these events at our emergency management center over at Kima. And so, if you recall seeing the mayor's daily briefings, particularly during COVID, and you can see all of those screens in the background, that's in our incident command. And so when one of these situations occurs, the police department, the fire department, the visitors bureau, the public works, parks and recreation, our EMS folks, our Red Cross partners, our Kima partners, I could just go on. There's 25 to 40 people in that room from every area. The power company, is right there with us. Everybody that has, plays a role in the safety of our community is in that room talking together, finding solutions, and responding to the crises in our community. And I'm very proud of the partnerships and the relationships that we built over time to be able to do that. And that's really, a testament to the mayor's leadership and to, my colleague, Elton Ushiro, his leadership over in Kima, and of course, Chief Gibson at the fire. We don't see ourselves as independent entities. We all work together as more like spokes in a wheel to keep the engine moving or keep the wheel rolling to address whatever issues our community is facing. And we've done it very, very well, I believe.
I like that analogy, spokes in a wheel. So just to maybe drill into a little more specificity. So what do we specifically see? There's a natural disaster going on. There's a hurricane. There's a flood. What are police officers actually out there, on the streets doing?
That's a great question. I think it's a timely question because as we see, especially unfortunately in Florida and the East Coast, the significant impact that Hurricane Helene had, the threat that the current hurricanes are facing to the communities in Florida and on the East Coast. I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to remember the significant impact that it has. So before I get to what the police department does, I think it's important for us to talk about what our community needs to do. I had the opportunity to respond as a law enforcement task force to both Louisiana and to Mississippi after the impact of Hurricane Katrina. And I spent 2 weeks providing law enforcement services after Hurricane Katrina. And I'll tell you, even to this day, if I talk a little bit too much about what I saw and what we did, I become overcome with emotions. And I know some of your viewers can relate to that because they lived through Hō'ike. Those lessons learned from those tragedies, we have to continue to carry forward and prepare so that we can do the best we can do to take care of ourselves before these natural disasters happen. Because as we saw in some of these communities, people need to heed the warnings of the public officials. If you're told to evacuate, you need to evacuate. We tell people to make sure that you have enough water, enough food supplies, enough medicines to at least get through a couple of weeks, because if we lose power, you may not have access to those things. It's very, very important to have that in place, because as we've seen, the police department and our resources are limited. And so after the event happens, what we're going to be trying to focus on is life-saving and ensuring that we protect life. It's going to be very, very difficult for us to be able to just help people with the little situations that they're in. So whatever you can do in advance. And like I said, I'll go back to Kauai. We've had hurricanes, we've had floods, we even had, a pretty concerning fire not too long ago on the west side that really shook us up after Lahaina. And so learning from each of those and making sure that we get our families best prepared for responding to those situations before they happen is critical. As the police department, like I said, what our job is to try to provide public safety. We would help make sure that we don't have the looting and the criminal lawlessness that sometimes happens after natural disasters, assisting with traffic flow and protecting areas to make sure that people don't get hurt because roads may be washed out. But that's where I go back to, and I'll just end it with an exclamation point. I've said it a few times already. Our entire community has to work together to make sure that the safety of our community and the resilience of our community is able to get through these difficult challenges.
All right. So I have a question written down here about recruitment and retention. We already talked about that, but just to circle back around briefly, I think part of, and you touched on it a little bit, the government salary, right? It's hard to convince people to take on this demanding job on a government salary, but how do you, there's got to be some interface between those salary challenges and the high and rising cost of living specifically here. What are some things, I know your options are limited. You can't just pay every rank and file patrol officer $90,000 a year. What are some options that you have to maybe offset, or even are there such options?
Yeah, therein lies the rub, right? Is a lot of the pressure, a lot of the challenges that our employees, and it's just not our police officers. Our professional staff make less than police officers, and they have no less responsibility to help their families survive than our police officers do. Our dispatchers, again, our clerks, our public safety workers, they all have the same obligations and responsibilities to caring for their family and providing for their family. And it's a challenge to do so. I just last night, I was at an event at a hotel, and one of my employees was working there bussing tables. And, it was 10 o'clock at night. He had to be at work the next day. And that's what they do to survive, is to work 2 or 3 jobs. And that's not a unique situation, right? Unfortunately, there's a lot of folks in our community that have to do the same thing to get by. I think, I go back to, we have to find solutions together to be able to address this. If you struggle paycheck to pay your bills, it impacts your family's opportunities, your opportunities. When those are affected, it affects your well-being. When your well-being is affected, it affects your morale. When your morale is affected and you come to work, it affects your morale at work. And so it's a cycle of challenges that, again, it's a holistic approach to try to fix. And as the chief, I could try to fix one area, but all those other areas are challenges, which is why, I appreciate the county council working and looking for unique areas to be able to make things more affordable housing options. The mayor's office doing the same thing with the programs, recently giving all of our employees the option for free health care. Those are the kinds of things that hopefully are able to allow us to recruit and retain the employees that we need to provide the services that our community expects.
All right. Well, it's good to hear that that things are being done, and that you're doing what you can, and we all have to do what we can to make to try to offset just how expensive it is to live here.
Yeah.
So how does the department, I'm sure it doesn't happen too often, but how does the department handle complaints or concerns from the public when they do happen? What steps are taken to ensure that there's transparency and accountability, and that someone can make a complaint and know that something's being done about it?
Yeah, so there's a couple different paths for people when they file a complaint. Obviously, one way is, and this is all on our website, Kaua'i.gov. You can go to Kaua'i.gov and then search for police department. It'll pull up that site, and there's an actual page about complaints that will it'll actually tell you what your options are. So there's that reference point. But to give you the quick overview, our community members can file complaints either by filing a complaint with the police commission and doing that through them, or they can file a complaint with the police department directly, or they can file a complaint with both. In either way, those complaints are investigated, and then a determination is made whether or not there's a preponderance of evidence to prove that the allegations were true and that action can be taken. And so just like every employee, there are due process rights and there are protections, employee protections, to make sure that those investigations are fair and impartial and that the results are handled appropriately. And so that is how people can make complaints and how they're handled. I review every complaint that comes into the police department, and when action needs to be taken, we take action. I think, accountability is key. And I think, look, I could tell you, it may not be any secret that in my 32 years of policing, I made a few mistakes. And I want to meet the person that's never made a mistake and find out how they did it.
Yeah, I'd love to meet that person too.
Yeah, and so for me, I think part of making mistakes is owning that mistake, learning from that mistake, and then doing everything you can do to not make that mistake again in the future. And if an employee makes that mistake and that's how they progress, then I believe that makes them better employees. One of the things, and this isn't the world according to Todd, when you start looking at, reading these leadership experts and sports experts and everything else, and we learn more from our mistakes and our failures than we do from our successes. And so, I try to encourage people to make your mistakes fast. If get it in, get it over with, and learn from it and move forward, because you're going to make a mistake. Everybody does. And so, when we look at these complaints, police officers aren't perfect, and there's different ways to handle every situation. And just because some person didn't like the way that situation was handled doesn't necessarily mean that the officer did anything wrong. And I think therein lies the rub sometimes, is that people feel like maybe nothing was done. But the reality is that it just wasn't done the way you wanted it done. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a violation. But that being said, there are times where there are violations, and we hold folks accountable. And those when you talk about transparency, every year, anyone who's been disciplined higher than a written reprimand, that information is provided to the legislature. It's posted publicly, and so that people know what discipline has occurred throughout the year. We talk about transparency. We are building. We've looking at having a program and implementing a program called Power Engage. And so hopefully we'll have that online in the very near future. And that's going to be a program that I'm really excited about, because it will automatically generate text messages and or phone surveys to our customers. I think sometimes we forget as police officers or government workers that the people that we interface with are really our customers, right? They call this public service because we're supposed to be serving other people. And sometimes people don't like the service they get. If you did something wrong, you might not like the service you get. Okay, but we are public servants, and so Power Engage is going to allow us, when it's fully implemented, to be able to have our community members receive a text message or a phone call that says, "Hey, Officer Raybuck was just at your house. Please tell us, was he professional? Did he answer, your questions? Is there any feedback that you have?" And then the police department will get in real time feedback of how our dispatchers are doing, how our clerks are doing, how our police officers are doing. And here's the best part, is they can get real time feedback on what they're doing right. Because one of the challenges in policing today is you only hear about what people don't like that you did. And the more opportunities that we can have for our community members to share what they did, what they appreciate our dispatcher did or our police officer did, the better it helps to reinforce those positive behaviors. It improves the morale of our employees, and it provides a better service to our community in that full circle communication gap. We were talking about communication earlier. And so I'm really excited about this program. I hope we can get it online very soon. And then that will, like I said, give us that feedback from our community on a real-time basis.
That sounds really cool. Yeah, it's almost like when you get DoorDash, and they say, "How was your dasher? Was he fast? Was the food spilled? Was it, and yeah, I could see it makes sense that a person isn't going to get pulled over, let off with a warning, and then immediately call the police commission and go, "Hey, I just got let go with a warning. That was really great."
Yeah. I'm really lucky. One of the greatest parts of my job is that I get members of the community that say, "Chief, this police officer pulled me over, and he was so professional, he was so kind, and he could have wrote me a ticket, he should have wrote me a ticket, but he didn't. And if he would have wrote me a ticket, I would have been okay with it because this guy was a real professional." And the same thing with our dispatchers and others. I get the positive feedback. But it takes a special person to take the time out of their day to give the positive feedback. I don't know about you, but I can tell you that whenever I ask for a manager in a restaurant, the waitress's eyes get big because they think that they're in trouble. And then the manager comes over with this trepidation look, and they're like, "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, I just wanted to tell you, this employee is amazing. One of the best services I've had." And then all of a sudden there's a sigh of relief.
Yeah, you can see the tension come out of them.
Because we're really good at complaining. We're not so good at complimenting. I'm guilty of this myself.
I think we all are.
And so I think that this program will allow us, when it's fully implemented, for our police officers. I could tell you in some of the jurisdictions where this was implemented, police officers come in and they start having these competitions to see who's going to get the most positive remarks that day. So positivity builds positivity, right? Negativity builds negativity. So if you want to focus on everything that's wrong, if you want to focus on everything you don't like, if you want to focus on everything that you think should be done differently, that breeds negativity. If you want to focus on what the possibility is, if you want to focus on where we can go and how we can make things better, that builds positivity.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And it sounds like sort of giving people that reminder, because I think it's that anger is a strong motivation. Frustration is a strong motivation. Contentment isn't as much of a motivating force, like subconsciously. So I think giving people that reminder, like sending them a text, like, hey, how was your interaction with the police officer that happened just now? Might remind people to share their positive feedback.
We hope so.
And I have to say, going back to, you were saying everybody makes mistakes and stuff. I've been on the wrong side of a traffic stop a few times, and on this island, all my interaction has always been pleasant with the police, whether I'm calling them for something else or I'm just, bump into a police officer on the street, or whether I'm being pulled over. Like you said, they're always courteous, they're always professional, and at least in my experience, they're never heavy-handed with the law.
Great.
There has been times where I'm like, oh, I'm getting a ticket, and they're like, hey, you got to fix this or I'm going to give you a ticket. I'm like, whoa, all right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we've sat here and talked about stuff that I wanted to talk about for this whole time, but is there anything in particular that you wanted to talk about or share with anyone who might be watching at home?
Well, we talked about this theme throughout, right? About the challenges that we face as a community, and also what we face as a department when it comes to our staffing and retention. And so I just really want to encourage, people to go to our website, follow our social media accounts, on Facebook at Kaua'i Police Department, on our Instagram at Kaua'i Police Department, at KPAL. Get plugged into your police department. That's what this is. It's your police department. Know what's going on in our police department, and look at the opportunities that we have. We have opportunities for dispatcher. We have opportunities for police officer. We have opportunities if you don't want to do one of those higher pressure jobs. We have accounting jobs. We have public safety worker jobs. We have a lot of open opportunities in our police department for people to make a difference in our community. One of the beautiful things that I love about this profession is that, everybody plays a part in every occupation, right? If all you had were plumbers in the world, man, it'd be great. You'd never have a clogged toilet or a clogged sink. But who the heck would pick up the garbage, right?
Right.
So we all play an important role in the everyday little things that make our lives better. But I'll tell you what, there are very few professions that you can come to work and know that you're making a difference where you live. And you're making a difference for your family. You're making a difference for your neighbors. And our police department affords people the opportunity to make a difference in this community. And so, if you're on the fence, or you even just thought about it, or maybe you're looking for a second career or a different career path, I would love for you to talk to us about an opportunity for employment at the Kaua'i Police Department. There are a lot of different skill sets out there, and it takes I hate this cliche, but it's so true. It takes a village to really do what's necessary for us to have a safe community. And so I just like to encourage people to consider working for the police department. It is a great opportunity for us to make a difference in someone's life every day. That's what has always gotten me through the tough times. That's what gets me through the difficult moments and the questionable times, or why am I still doing this? It's the fact that I know that tomorrow when I come into work, I might have the opportunity to do just even something as simple as smiling or talking to somebody that's going to change the trajectory for that person's day, that might change the trajectory for that person's year and or that person's life. That's what this job affords people the opportunity to do. That's why I'm proud of the men and women that come to work every day as dispatchers, as our professional support staff, and as our officers that put on this badge, is they don't do it for themselves. They do it to give this community something to be grateful for, that you can take your kids to work and enjoy the freedoms that we have in our country. And so, come work with KPD. I'd love to have you there.
All right. Well, that sounds great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Chief, and thanks for helping us kick off our inaugural episode.
My pleasure.
Well, that's our show. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to have a new episode for you every single month. We're going to have different first responder agencies in here. We'll have the fire department. We'll have Ocean Safety Bureau, KEMA. I'm sure we'll have KPD in here again. And if there's any first responders that you want to hear from or any questions that you'd like to have answered, feel free to let us know. This is we're Hō'ike Community Media. We're all about the community, and this show is for you. So you can email me. My email address is at the bottom of the screen right now. And let me know your questions. Let me know who you'd like to see on the show, and tune in next month. We'll see you soon. Aloha.
Aloha.